Well, I titled our sermon today, The Walking Dead, and the reason I titled it that is I don't know if any of you guys ever seen the TV show, The Walking Dead, about zombies. They're dead, but yet they're still alive. And so the Church of Sardis has been referred to quite often as the Walking Dead. So today I want to talk to you about the Church of Sardis. Now, there's a story in an old Reader's Digest, and it's about a cat that was run over by a car. And the cat belonged to a 4-year-old boy named Billy. And before he could find out about the cat's death, you know, his mom being the loving mom that she was, she decided she would sneak and bury that cat real quick and just not even mention it. But after a couple of days, you know, Billy began to notice, hey, the cat's missing. What happened to my cat? And finally, the mom sets him down to explain to him and have the talk that his cat has died. And in an attempt to make Billy feel better, she said, "It's all right, Billy. Your cat is up in heaven with God." But Billy was really puzzled by his mom's statement. What in the world would God want with a dead cat? Now, before I go any further, I want to make it clear that I'm not preaching a sermon this morning on the state of the dead. What I'm doing is I'm making a statement about those that God will take to heaven when Jesus returns again. Will God be taking anyone dead to heaven? No. Of course not. The Bible makes it very clear that when Jesus comes, those who are faithful that have died will have life returned to them, and then they will be taken to heaven. Nobody dead is going to heaven. Revelation 21:4 tells us God's going to wipe away all tears from their eyes. There will be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. Neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things have passed away. So this verse tells us that there's no way that death is going to exist in heaven or on the new earth. I mean, what would God be wanting with a bunch of dead people? Like the little boy said, what did God want with a dead cat? God's plan has never once involved that which is dead, but that which is alive. Even the crucifixion of Jesus would have been useless without the resurrection. It's the fact that He lives again that we have hope for eternity. So make no mistake about it. God has no use for anything that's dead. Now, it's important to bear this in mind as we look at the topic this morning. I want to look at the letter written to the Church of Sardis, the 5th church of the 7 in the book of Revelation. And if you was doing your Sabbath school lesson this morning, you see we're going to start dealing with some churches. We will begin in Revelation chapter 3. And hopefully everybody can see that. And I didn't print it too small. Maybe I should have made more slides. But Revelation chapter 3. And I want to read verses 1 through 6. This is the letter or the note, instruction that God gives to the church of Sardis. And pay attention to the words. It says, "Unto the angel of the church of Sardis write, These things saith that he that hath the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know thy works, that thou hast a name, that thou livest and art dead. Be watchful, and strengthen the things which remain, that are ready to die. For I have not found thy works perfect before God. Remember therefore that thou hast received and heard, and hold fast and repent. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come on thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know the hour which I will come upon thee. Thou hast a few names, even in Sardis, which have not defiled their garments. And they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. He that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot his name out of the book of life. But I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches." Now, as we read this letter, as I was going through it, there's 2 things that should have stood out to you right away. The first thing we notice is God don't have anything good whatsoever to say about the church of Sardis. Did you notice that? Of all the 7 churches, when God writes to Sardis, He has nothing to commend them for. Nothing to say, you guys are doing wonderful in this area. I want to commend you for that. I want to thank you for all your hard work. He has nothing. He says you're dead. The only thing that comes close to a positive statement is found at the end of verse 1, where Jesus says that this is a church that used to have a reputation of being a living church, even though it's actually a dying church. This is a church that was obviously once a very active church. And they've made a reputation for themselves, and now that's all they have is that reputation. That memory of the glory day is all that's left. Resting on their past accomplishments, they feel no need to move forward anymore. We did all this. This is what we did. We're going to stop here. And as a result, this church has begun to petrify. Now, the second thing that should stand out in this letter to the church of Sardis is how Jesus recognizes that this church is really dead. What did He say was the indicator? Jesus says what they were doing. He says, I know thy works. He says to Sardis, and it's your works that tell me that you're not living, that you're dead. I can tell by your works that you're dead. The walking dead. Now the Bible tells us from our scripture reading this morning, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. So salvation's not a gift that we can earn by works. Salvation is something that is giving freely. In Revelation we discover that what God is doing here is He's using the works as an indicator of just how saved the church really is. Just how alive in the faith that they really are. He's using the works as like a little test to say how much they are actually doing. Now there's a lot of churches, even in the SDA churches, that would receive this same declaration today from God. Churches of the frozen chosen. These are the churches that come together each week and they talk a lot about God's salvation, but they've lost their drive to do something with it. They talk a lot about what it was like to be saved and the zeal they once had, even though there's nothing new happening. I want to share with you a story before I go on in this sermon. And this is a story about a small community. And they lived right close to the Atlantic coast. And this area had horrible, turbulent weather. And there was a reef there just a few miles right off the shore. And over the years, there was piles of ships that had crashed into that reef or had problems, that had sunk and went down. So they decided that they were going to form a search and rescue brigade. So they purchased some land and they built this emergency shelter. They brought specialists in how to train them to conduct the rescue missions. And they purchased the highest of equipment, some of the best money could buy. It was a huge investment of time and resources. And the community was finally able to serve in an emergency. And over the years, well, they saved dozens and dozens of lives and ships that had gone down. But as time passed and the nautical technologies on the ships improved, there wasn't hardly any ships going down on the reef anymore. And the rescue brigade, they became less active. The weekly meetings where they would train and be ready to go in case anything could happen, well, these started turning into social gatherings. So they started storing the equipment away, started putting all that stuff up, and they installed some pool tables, and they had some ping pong tables and everything going, shuffleboard going. And the former search and rescue volunteers, they would gather together and they would talk about all the successful missions that they had been on in the days gone by. And the new volunteers, well, they would just listen in awe. Wow, that's so awesome. You guys did all that. That's amazing. Well, this went on from week to week and carried on, and they had all their rescue equipment stored away, and time went by. And until one night, a particular bad storm happened. and the alarm came in telling them that a ship had gone down. And there was little that could be done. These men were not well enough prepared. Those who had received the training were too inactive to be of any use, and the new guys were not adequately trained to do anything. They would have been unsafe to send them out. They couldn't get to the rescue equipment, and even if they could have, it's not been properly cared for. And that night they were caught off guard, and the ship that crashed off their shore, those people all perished. Now, an important point that I tell this story to try to make here is up until that night, they called themselves a search and rescue brigade. They still gathered at the rescue hall. They still talked about search and rescue work. And for all intents and purpose, they appeared to be a search and rescue group. But there was one element that was no longer present, a very vital element. They weren't doing the work of a search and rescue group. They just talked about being a search and rescue group. Now the sad part is that there are many churches today that started off as churches, but they're not churches anymore. They say they are churches. They meet and sit in the building each week. They have pews. They have all the equipment needed. They have the hymnals. They have the Bibles. They have the declarations of faith. They have everything to look like a church. They have all the appearance of a church. But based on what they are doing, they're nothing more than a social club. Rather than serving as a hospital for sinners, these places have turned into hotels for saints. And when the call comes out to go out and help and rescue a dying world that is going down with millions on board this ship, well, they don't have a clue what to do. This is the condition that God found the church of Sardis. And to this church and to all churches, God gives this instruction as to how to get out of the near-dead condition. Revelation chapter 3, verses 2 and 3. Be watchful and strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die. For I have not found thy works perfect before God. Remember therefore how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast and repent. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come to thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. Jesus tells them, you are at the point of death. You're on your deathbed. You're getting ready to die. But then he says, wait a minute, there's still hope. We may be living on borrowed times, but it means there's still time left. Now there may be someone here today whose spiritual life's in a comatose state. But God has said that as long as there is a breath of life, as long as we have breath in us, then there's still hope. This tells us that even if a church seems like it's as dead as possibly can be, there's hope. Even if someone is so spiritually dead that they could be buried right now, God says there's still hope. There's hope even for the dead because Jesus is in the business of bringing the dead back to life. Now notice what commands that Jesus gives to this church. He commands them to be watchful. I know this morning I'm in a church where we want to make sure that our spiritual life doesn't die. Jesus says we should be on alert at all times. If we don't carefully guard our gift of salvation, then guess what? It can be taken away from you. Being watchful is so important for God's church that it's mentioned twice in the command. Notice the warning given if we are not watchful. If we are not watching, Jesus says, I will come upon you as a thief, and we will not realize what's happening until it's too late. I want to look at Luke chapter 12, verses 37 and 40. It says, blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when He cometh, shall find watching. Verily I say unto you that He shall gird Himself and make them to sit down to meat, and will come forth and serve them. And if He shall come in the second watch, or come into third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants. And this know, that if the good man of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not have suffered his house to be broken through. Be ye therefore ready also, for the Son of Man cometh at an hour when you think not. Now Jesus is making 2 points here for us to consider when it comes to why we must remain in the constant state of watchfulness. The first reason we are told is because when Jesus returns, it will already be too late if we're not prepared. We don't know the day or the hour of Jesus' return. But we can be certain of this. It's closer today than it was yesterday. It's closer in this moment than it was an hour ago. Even a minute ago. Every second that passes brings us one step closer to the return of Christ. And we must treat every moment as if it's the moment that He should appear. I hope that if Jesus would appear right now, that all of us is ready. Anyone know the history of the Venice Church knows that the founders started out believing that they knew Jesus would return, or when He would return. As they studied the prophecies of the Bibles, they became convinced that His return was imminent. And when it didn't happen as expected on the day, we count this day as the Great Disappointment, on October the 22nd, 1844, many began to doubt and they began to fall into discouragement. It was a few weeks after the Great Disappointment that William Miller wrote these words to the discouraged Advent believers. Although surrounded with enemies and scoffers, yet my mind is perfectly calm, and my hope in the coming of Christ is as sure as ever. I have fixed my mind upon another time, and here I mean to stand until God gives me more light. And that is today, today, and today, until He comes. And I will see Him whom my soul yearns. Today could be the day that Jesus comes. Today could be the end of time and the beginning of eternity. Today could be the day of reckoning. And even if Jesus doesn't appear, there's no guarantee that any of us is going to wake up tomorrow. I just read a story of a young man in Williamson, West Virginia, where I'm originally from. He was running from the police, jumped in the river. He didn't expect to die that night. He died of hypothermia. He froze to death from the cold water. They actually found him and took him to the hospital, and he still died, running from the police. He didn't expect to die that night. None of us knows what time we're going to die. Yet we go on and we live like we have forever. We pretend like, oh, I'll worry about that when I'm way old. Today could be the very last day before Jesus returns. It's the last day we live before Jesus returns. Would you be ready if Jesus came in this moment? That's the question you should be searching in your heart this morning. Would you be ready? Would you be ready if this were the last moment you had before facing Jesus? Have you put your trust in Jesus this morning? His call is to be ready at all times, to hold to Him as our Savior, and live every moment in anticipation, knowing that that moment could be the moment that Jesus returns. Another reason we need to be on our toes watching, is according to the passage in Luke, is because the devil has made it his mission to steal and to kill and destroy that which God has created. If you look at 1 Peter 5:8, it says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking who he may devour. Now I want to share with you one more story, and it's about a meeting that Satan had with his chief of demons. Christianity spreading throughout the land like wildfire. And it's growing. And they needed to come up with a way to devise or undermine this work. Now the arch deceiver, Satan, he's calling for a suggestion. Anybody got any ideas? We got to slow this Christianity down. One of them spoke up and said, we could bring some more hypocrites into the church. No, said the devil, the Christians realize that there will always be hypocrites and are teaching others to look to Jesus. That won't work. What about bringing in some fierce persecution? Another one's suggestion. If we make being a Christian unbearable, they'll run away for sure. That might get some, said the devil, but what we found is that when we bring in persecution, the few that leave, they end up being replaced by dozens more who are convinced by the faith of those who remain. It's not a successful campaign. We don't want to go that route. Many ideals were discussed and suggested and thrown out when at last Lucifer turns to his counsel and he says, I think what would work best, he declared, is to make Christians lose sight of the return of their God. Yes, I think that would work. You mean we'll tell them that He's not coming back? Questioned one of the demons. No, replied Satan, that would be foolish. If we told them He wasn't coming, they'd see right through that. But he said to get them to think He's not coming for a long time. Then we'll make progress. Remind them of how generations before thought He was coming back in their time, and it never happened. Make them to believe that there's still too many things that has to happen, that they're probably not going to see Jesus return in their time. Make them think that it's so far in the distance that they don't even have to worry about it. Make them believe they have plenty of time. Don't get them to forget it altogether. No, just get them to think of it about something that's going to take place in the distance. Almost an unforeseeable sort of way. Once we get them to believe that the return of Jesus couldn't possibly be as close as the book says, they'll stop concerning themselves with being ready. And that's when we shall have them. The chief demons looked at each other and they smiled and then departed to fulfill their mission. Now the fear is that too long that many of us have fallen for that deception. For too long we have been unfaithful in our watchfulness for Jesus' return. Too many have realized too late that they were not ready. We've lost sight of the nearness of Jesus' return, and it has come up on us as a thief. As Seventh-day Adventists, too many of us are waiting for the passing of Sunday laws before we believe the end is here. But by then it may be too late. We say Jesus is coming, but live as though He's not coming for years. Too many a Christian has fallen asleep during their watch. Too many Christians have become as zombies walking around going through the motions. They've become the walking dead. Too many a Christian is going to church, but they aren't ready to go to heaven. Too many a church is at the point of death because they have failed to sound the cry of their Lord's returns. You know, there's a reason we are called Seventh-day Adventists. It means that we're anticipating, looking forward to the coming of Jesus. And too many times we don't act like we're looking forward to the coming of Jesus. We just tell people we're Adventists. The church has become a hotel for saints because we think there's still plenty of time in the future to be a hospital for the sinners. Wake up. You're walking dead is the call from God this Sabbath. We're living on borrowed time, and whether you know it or not, Jesus is coming back. We need to answer this morning how He's going to find us. Is He going to find us? Is He going to write a letter and say, I know your works, you are dead? Or is He going to write a letter and say, I know your works, you have been faithful, my good and faithful servants. You are alive. We need to answer this morning how He's going to find us. If we want to be ready, then we need to be watching for His return. We need to live as though His return could be any moment. Until He returns, your cry and my cry must be, today, today, today is when He will come for me, and I will be ready. To those who are ready at His return, Jesus gives a promise. He who overcomes shall be clothed in white garments. And I will not blot out his name from the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. To the one who overcomes, to the one who is ready. I know there may be some here today who's asking, well, how can I be ready? I have one more scripture to share with you to answer the question, to be ready. And it says, they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto the death. You are made ready when you overcome by the blood of the Lamb. What that means is that we put our trust and we put our sacrifice in Jesus. Our trust in the sacrifice of Jesus. Christ is the only way to be made worthy of heaven. It was because of our sinfulness that He shed His blood. And because of His shed blood, that's how we are made sinless. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but so that through Him the world might be saved. For those who believe, the return of Jesus brings no fear, but joy. For those who put their trust in His sacrifice, these people are going to be found worthy at His appearing. Every day we should be asking ourselves, are we ready? If today was today. And we want to wait on some of those Sunday laws. You know, there's a law in Pennsylvania. I was talking to a car dealer the other day. Do you know it's illegal to sell a car on Sunday for a car dealer in Pennsylvania? Maybe, just maybe, the Sunday law won't be as big as we think it is. And we're waiting for this grand Sunday law to come. Maybe there's already bits and pieces of it already taken place. Right here in Pennsylvania, the car dealer told me, oh no, it's against the law to sell a car on Sunday. We already have bits and pieces. All they got to do is add a little more to it, and we're there. The coming of Jesus is closer than we think. As Adventists, we're supposed to believe that the coming of Jesus is here. That's why we call ourselves Seventh-day Adventists. Jesus is coming. And if you can't look at the news, if you can't look at the world, if you can't look at the shape of just the United States today and realize that, then you need to take the glasses off because you're blind. And Jordy can see it, and he's blind. We overcame by the word of our testimony. Now let me ask one last question. Can you testify to something you have not been a part of? Can anybody here give a testimony on something they've not been part of? No. To have a testimony, you must have a connection with that which you are testifying. What this means is that when we overcome, we have a relationship with the one in whose sacrifice we have to put our trust. Putting your trust in Jesus is not a one-time event. It's a daily, moment by moment. Any second now, He's coming back for me and for you. And I want to be ready when that event comes. You know, I'm only 40 years old. And I realized that 40 was, wait a minute, I was just 20 yesterday. 40 went by quick. Life is but a vapor. It goes by so quick. You're not promised tomorrow. And we live as though we're going to be here forever. And after all the sickness I just went through with the low iron, I didn't think I was actually going to make it through that. That was so rough. I honestly didn't know whether I was going to live or not. I didn't know if I was ever going to be the same, if I was ever going to have my strength again. I've never been so weak in my life than being anemic. Couldn't breathe. To get out of bed and go to the bathroom, I was hitting heart rates of like 160. Wow. Getting ready to go on, have a heart attack just to go to the restroom. Had to call an ambulance a few times and have them take me to the hospital because it didn't go back down. I'm resting heart rate 160. I didn't think I was going to make it through that. But that experience showed me that at any moment, one of us could leave here today, drive down the road and get in a car accident and not make it. Back in my hometown, I keep track of the news there. There was a mother, a daughter, and a granddaughter stopped to just turn off, and an 18-wheeler rammed into the back of them about 70 miles an hour and killed all three of them. This happened just not very long ago, not even a month ago. I still stay in contact with all the people there where I used to live, and they all post the stories, and I watch the news there. We don't know. You don't know that you're going to be here tomorrow. It's a moment by moment, any second now, He's coming back. And if you're at that point today, then it is your chance to be ready today. Today is the day of your salvation. Today is the time. You put it off and you think, you know what, I'm going to do it some other time. Some other time I'm going to come to Jesus. Some other time I'm willing to sell out. I got time. I'm going to do it in the future, where when this changes or that changes or whatever it is that changes in my life, then I'm going to go serve Jesus. Jesus says today is the day. You know what? There's always going to be some obstacle. I go out and give Bible studies and I hear people say, well, when I stop doing this, and this, then I'm going to serve Jesus. There's always going to be something else that you're going to have to give up. And you're not going to be able to give these things up, or you're not going to be able to change the person you are until you go ahead and give it all to Jesus. I've said this 100 times. I'm going to say it again. You've got that empty hole in your heart. And as humans, we try to fill it with other people. We try to fill it with stuff. We try to fill it with money. There's so many things we try to fit in there to fill that hole, that we know something is missing, and we want to fill it up with so much garbage. Garbage of things that get old, that no longer last, that you can't take with you. When I call my mom on a daily basis, and when I talk to her, the only thing she's worried about is stuff. Where's my stuff? Make sure you tell them to take care of my stuff. When I die, you can have my stuff. And I say, I don't want any stuff. I don't need stuff. I have all kinds of stuff. I can't take stuff with me. When I die, all this stuff, somebody else is going to enjoy it. I got a buddy that has a Shelby Mustang stored in a garage. It's got like 1,000 miles on it. I told him I appreciate him storing that, because when he dies, somebody like me is going to buy it and drive it. Because he can't take it with him. All the things of this world mean nothing. You're not taking nothing with you. The only thing that matters when you die is, are you ready to meet Jesus? That's the question we need to answer today. Are you ready? Are you looking forward? Are you living your life as if tomorrow could be the day? As if the next 5 minutes we could pray and dismiss church and the heavens roll back and Jesus appear, and if you're not ready, it's going to be sad. If you die tonight in your sleep and you're not ready, it's going to be sad.